Welcome everyone in this webinar with Streetbees Shares. Today we'll talk about how you can use ChatGPT to chat to your consumers and share what we have learned so far. We'll start with giving you a brief introduction of who we are and with the happy news that now in research briefing actually got 10 times faster with this technology. We'll discuss how we can actually scrap the survey and talk about having a real conversation with the consumer and how this speeds up actually getting the right insights for our brands. And of course, we'll close with a little bit of a wrap up on what it means for consumer insights as a community and a little bit of an invitation to get involved with us further down the line. Today, I'm one of your speakers, Derya Guvenc, Strategic Insights Lead, and I'm with my co-presenter, Sean.
Hi, everyone. Sean O'Connell. I'm the Chief Product and Technology Officer at Streetbees. I thought it'd be useful maybe to give a 30-second what is Streetbees, just so we all have a similar context. So we are a consumer insights intelligence business. We run a community of sort of 4.5 million bees. These are people who talk to us. We get their views and opinions via an app, and we collect 1 million moments, or give or take, every month. We specialized in talking in unstructured information. Right. So if you look at the chat here, our UI feels kind of like WhatsApp. It is very fluid, back and forth. We use all of the features of the device, uploading photos, videos, things like that. So we get a rich profile of how the consumer is thinking. We have a long heritage over the past 8 years of doing interesting things with artificial intelligence, ranging from NLP, processing all of this text to turn it into something useful. We do a lot of work in segmentation, like insights with a big capital I in terms of demand spaces, demand maps, understanding the universe, but also things like topic modeling. So what do things like sustainability, health, what do these things actually mean in the mind of consumers? We see ChatGPT, large language models, as kind of like the next phase in the story of what technology is going to unlock in market research. Now, before joining this call, I was looking at the weather forecast, and if you happen to be based in UK or in London, you will see a staggering fact that there are 6 days of sunshine ahead of us. What I did in advance of this was I decided I was going to upgrade my barbecue. Went to Amazon, because it's generally where I start. I did a little bit of work, right? I had to search for a barbecue. I had to make a trade-off between, was it going to be gas? Was it going to be charcoal? I did some filtering. I read some customer reviews, but ultimately I stuck a product in the buy box and it appeared, hopefully it will appear before the sun runs out in a day or two, right? It's easy. We think that the application of this technology is going to be transformative in consumer insights because 3 things change. One is the market research brief, the generation of questions, the generation of a survey artifact will be automated. I'm going to show you a bit about why we think that's possible. We think the survey experience is going to radically change, right? There will no longer be a place for a static survey with a standard Likert scale, and we think the possibilities unlocked here change the nature of surveys. And the last thing is, we think the days of having to sift through large numbers of data tables and indices and things like that, we think a lot of that complexity gets abstracted away. What does this mean? Insights gets faster. We think the cost becomes materially lower. And we think you can use this technology to allow a much broader set of people with business problems add real consumer insights to what they're doing. So let's make that a little bit real. The product I'm showing you here, we're calling an Insights Copilot, right? So here, and it kind of looks in many senses a little bit like ChatGPT, which I'm sure many of you have used. So I'm being asked, how can I help it be helpful today, right? And I'm going to give you a scenario, and I'm going to stress we do not currently work with BMW. We not currently work with Tesla. This is an illustration of, let's get into the persona. I work for BMW. I want to be able to set a marketing messages because I've got to compete against Tesla. I've got to do a campaign. I've got to come up with a strategy. I want to understand why people don't like Tesla and might choose a BMW. Now, what's happening in the background is we've developed a bot that we've trained on all of the briefs and different problems that we've worked on over the past 8 years. So here it's asked me, what's my commercial objective? I'm going to keep this very short and sweet. I need to sell more EVs, take share from Tesla, right? So those 8 years of problems have a range of classifiers. They have a range of tooling to try and direct the bot to focus in the right area for the problem that is relevant. So it whirls away in the background to gather that information. And what it is starting to output here is the first phase of a market research brief that it will help you co-create. So here we see Tesla's success is driven by several factors. It's coming up with the hypothesis. We've given it a whole framework for how to think about structuring hypotheses. It is then introducing the different drivers, the dimensions, the things behind how the consumer might be thinking, acting, that we consider to be important to address this problem. Now, what we're going to develop, if you look up here, is a whole workflow where I could maybe refine this brief. So I can say, hey, the hypothesis needs to be a bit tweaking. Can you make it look a bit like that? But ultimately, what you're doing is you're going to build a bot that will jump into the Streetbees app and will start talking to consumers, gather the data and present it. So let's go to the bot view of this. And I will flip over to this one. And so here we have a very simplified bot UI. Imagine this is in the app. We're still in our world of electric cars. And this is interesting in the first phase because it's like, it's asking me, it's not presenting me a scale, it's presenting me an open text question. What comes to mind when you think about electric cars? So for me, because I'm on Twitter a lot, what comes to mind is Elon Musk. And of course, in the traditional world, we might have a box where we'd had something called other, and we might be able to enter Elon Musk. But I think what changes this technology is, in Back to the Future terms, we can go off the road. We don't need the roads of the survey. So immediately it's saying, like, what do I think about his role in promoting electric cars, right? And I can say, I don't like him. Now, the bot is tuned to basically probe and dig into things that it thinks may be interesting. Or it's looking for nuances. It's looking for some of the novelties. So here it's saying, is it because of his personality or something else? And I say, I don't like the way Teslas look. I worry about reliability. And again, it will make a decision. It's like, do we want to push more on this? Do we find out more? And then it sees, so I've said, I don't like the way Teslas look. And what it says, oh, that's kind of interesting. Maybe I want to go down a level. What kind of car desire do I prefer? Can you tell me a bit more about the reliability? So we see all over the world, we've gone from basically a fixed pathway in survey construction to actually starting to be able to zig and zag in response to where the user is going. Now, what happens after we do all of these? So we've been working on testing this with numerous different problems. What happens at the end of the process is there is something which probably looks a little bit like a slide deck / a dashboard. The novelty here is everything that you are seeing, the text, the synthesis, the percentages, calculation, are generated without human intervention. What we have developed is a capability. So let's go down. I'm going to pick a specific slide. Let's take this one. The bot has we fed the bot the data set. The bot has been able to classify the data. So all of those conversations, it's bucketed up into these different bins. And you can see that I have opinions about Elon Musk. I wasn't alone there. There was like 3% of respondents actually were expressing opinions there. And we can also see brand reputation, trust, safety, performance, a range of different things. The bot has gathered those together. It's also being able to classify those. It's determined that there is a statistically significant difference between people who are not in market for Tesla and people who would be consider purchasing Tesla. So all of the cross tabulation, if you will, is this variable important, not important, is happening in the background without the end user having to worry about those things. And then finally, it will tell you what's going on in the chart. Now, let's jump back and try and unpick the different things that we've shown there, these three ideas. So the first one we spoke about, briefing will get 10 times faster, okay? And I introduced the concept of this co-pilot, the 8 years of data, and having a workflow that then allows you to go on and generate the survey. This is something we have in early stage test at the moment. And what we've learned, and I suppose the problems that we're interested in collaborating with the Insight community on, is how we make this experience really work for a broad set of people who want to discover consumer information. So we've seen that, as in the real world, right, where you're briefing an agency, that initial brief and the quality of the initial brief is really critical. If you're going to be a little bit lazy like I was and just say, hey, I want to sell more EVs, you're going to get a slightly vanilla set of response as to whether you put a bit more effort in. And Derya, perhaps you talk about how articulating the problem and where we see the human touch as being key still.
Yeah, I mean, at this stage, even it's quite impressive. It's quite a powerful assistant. But of course, there's, I believe, still an element of helping the powerful assistant with the human know-how and expertise, which is, as you mentioned, articulation of the problem, the initial stage of setting up, but also at the very end, getting those insights into more commercial action and recommendations. But even then, I personally am quite excited, like, about the speed of it and the initial kickoff being absolutely differentiated, I think, going forward.
Second idea that we introduced and we're kind of interested in is this notion of scrapping the survey and shifting more to a conversation with the user. If we think about traditional survey construction, right, this is hopefully everyone will be ticking this column at the end of this session, but this is what we would do, right? We'd have a Likert 5-point scale, we have some statements, we do some randomization here. But what this whole data structure format is optimized for getting clean data into the system that is easy to analyze. It is not optimized for getting like interesting, nuanced shades of gray answers that fall between the cracks of these different variables that are put through, right? I think what's happened over the past 10 years, gradually as machine learning capability has become more and more refined, was we've moved from a world where everything had to fit into a pre-described list to a world where you could actually have open text answers at scale, and you could generate insight off the back of that. So we do that today, our bread and butter in terms of how do we build a demand space, is process a lot of open text. I think what's novel and interesting about this next stage is that you make the conversation a discussion, right? And you can get into more detail. And you can have a bot that has a bit more intuition, that can act a little bit more like an ethnographer would doing a one-to-one interview, and can delve a little bit deeper. And I think anyone who's ever done perhaps a traditional U&A survey, where it's 25 minutes of dealing with matrices and occasional open text, right? That's a hard proposition for a respondent to sustain engagement. It tails off as you go through. I think what we found that's interesting when we've tested this experience with our bees is that they see it as a significant improvement on even an open text survey, which is probably 80% of what we do today. They like the interactiveness. They like the idea that it feels like having a conversation with a real person. They think it's better than the other way. It comes with some challenges that still need to be solved, right? When you're dealing with a bot that has some technical constraints on how much memory it has, you run the risk of question repetition. It takes a little bit longer. We manage that today because we pay the respondent more when we know that the activity is going to take a little bit longer. And for now, it's a little bit slower, because to generate all of this stuff, as you saw in the demo, it takes a few seconds to go through because it's thinking up the next question based on what you've said. And so there needs to be a little tolerance on behalf of the respondent that's acceptable. But what we're seeing is the vast majority, the overwhelming majority, are seeing value in this as an experience. I think explicitly linked to that value is that they actually, when we look at the transcripts, they're giving us more interesting insights, right? And some of that is, you can imagine, is the healthy back and forth, because it's kind of like, now I'm having a conversation that feels like a person. I'm going to say a little bit more because I'm getting it's like tennis, right? You're hitting the ball, I'm hitting it back. It kind of feels a bit light. And we think this is going to be interesting. Derya, perhaps talk about categories and how we...
Yeah, I think there are product categories that are definitely more emotionally engaging for consumers. Let's say pet care. We know consumers love talking about their pets, the toys and the food and everything. And there are some product categories that are mostly functional in the lives of a consumer, like surface cleaners. So one of the challenges for consumer insights is, of course, getting down to the skin of those sometimes unconscious drivers. And I think this is a great tool to make the playing ground even for everyone, whether it's a more emotionally engaged category or just purely functional, because as you mentioned, the back and forth allows for digging slightly deeper, a richer set of 5W questions in a way, rather than us researchers creating multiple routings trying to get to the bottom of the subconscious choice driver. So I think that's the most exciting bit, that across different product categories, this has quite rich areas of application.
There's still some things that I think anyone in this space, some relatively hard technical problems that need to be solved out. So we are relying on a lot of our proprietary data, the many hundreds of thousands of questions that we've asked historically to solve some of these things. So, leading questions with this technology are definitely a problem, particularly with ChatGPT. ChatGPT is optimized to please, to give you something that sounds nice. This means that if it detects you're displaying a certain attitude or emotion, it may double down and inject that into the question. It has to manage this concept. Often it will think in pairs. So here, it will tell me the difference, what you like about Fiji water and Evian. Like a researcher would know that's not a great question, because which one do you want me to talk about? You want to talk about one or the other? And generally, you want to split these ideas out so you get a cleaner designation. And the last thing is having an appreciation of, you still need a translation layer that takes what is, I suppose, business problem, translated into marketing research speak, that then has to be translated into consumer terms that they understand. So there's still, I think, things there that get ironed out as we engage more with this technology. Finally, insights become instant. So what I showed you in that demo, we think end-to-end can be delivered in about 24 hours with a good, assuming incidents and everything else is we're not looking for Martians to talk about something complicated if it's in the realms of possible. We spoke about the ability for the bot to do data synthesis, to present you cuts of that data. We can imagine in the very near future a UI here where you, as the person who's collected that data, might want to describe this data in a different way and look at a different cut. And rather than having to grapple with complicated filters and various other tools, we think there'll be mechanisms to go about that analysis that are much simpler. We, about 3 weeks ago, did an exercise. We pitted our research team, skilled market researchers, many years of experience, against a team that was the bot, right? And they were both given the same customer brief on a Monday morning at 9:30. And then what we wanted to do was to see, well, how does it compare to best of the best market researchers? And this is kind of how we're thinking about the state of today. I think within 3, 6, 9 months, this picture is going to be moving very quickly. But brief generation, right? The strategist with the context of the customer, the category, the competitive landscape can take a more 360 view. The machine is good. It's not as good, but it is radically faster, right? The ability to come up with questions, again, first pass is good, but it's done pretty much near instantly relative to it maybe taking half a day for a skilled researcher to think about the problem. And this rises, I think, to excellent when we start to augment the questions, clean them up, do various other things. Data processing, so all of these responses coming through, the classification of all of these labels, the grouping of things together, materially better. The machine is materially better. And then I think where we are in the world is what the machine is excellent at is this automation of the data, cross-tabulation, initial insight discovery, evolving its understanding. And what the human partner is very much skilled at is relating the problem to wider in the category, adding the nuance, the shades of gray, the depth that comes with having worked in a specific domain. We also see that the intangible qualities of the researcher are still critical. When we ran the analysis for the bot versus the analysis of the human team, we started looking at what was different. Some of our researchers are much more assertive in how they think about their tone. Some have analytical styles that are very, very they're in the weeds of p-values. Others might be a little bit over here. And I think actually a lot of the time your tolerance for where you want to toggle these little dials might be different depending on the problem. And so we think that how this sort of stylistic approach gets encoded to maybe the output is an interesting way about how we partner up how a researcher thinks with how the machine thinks. Here's what we learned here then. Significantly faster delivery time. This works around best on specific discrete questions. Right now, this is not a replacement to generate demand spaces, do a very complicated analysis. We think this will work very nicely in the ad hoc world. Derya, perhaps you talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think this is really about understanding where you can, you have targeted questions that probably got pushed down the list because you have other priorities and you have to look at the big picture all the time. But then we know the growth comes from the incremental gains, and there's that opportunity of having the very targeted question in a fast way without creating any inefficiencies in resource allocation. So I think that's definitely a big win for all the teams. And just looking broadly in terms of like what all this new technology and solutions could mean for consumer insights, both from an agency side, but also for, of course, brand consumer insights teams. I think overall, the main idea is more people can ask more questions. So we know that overall teams are shrinking, but the needs are growing. We know internally across functions, it's not just consumer insights, but also marketing, innovation, and even sales teams sometimes want to have a chat with the consumer. This creates an agility that I think consumer insights and agencies needed for a long time to handle a larger volume at times. It gives us that ability to double down on the under-researched topics. As I mentioned, of course, we have to allocate resource and budget, and sometimes we have to pick what's more scalable, but that means we need to deprioritize some questions that could potentially give us the first mover advantage, and they end up being that long tail of wish lists. But this is a tool that can enable those ad hoc questions. Rather than firefighting in the last minute, we can actually have a plan around that. It also makes the smaller budgets more effective, especially if we think about global budgets and local budgets and the tension and how it's allocated. I think it opens up a whole new possibility of having those add-on research when we have the main framework and we want to do add-on research on to improve it or localize a study. I think the direct access to the consumer by more functions in a company is quite critical. Initially, it sounds scary because we know consumer insights, of course, would love to have full visibility of it, but the agility of it is quite promising from innovation or marketing teams. That richness, that democratization of the conversation with the consumer is valuable. And of course, we said there will be more questions and more people asking questions. But the good thing is this tool brings up the speed too. We have faster answers to the wider range of questions. So overall, I think end to end, it's quite promising for consumer insights. And going forward, what's the future role of all of us, agencies and insights teams? I think number one, this idea of brief becoming faster, moving away from an extremely detailed project brief, saving time there, and instead focusing on business questions and research questions, the things that we would like to uncover. That's a whole shift in ways of working and where we spend most of our time. The centralized handling of the project pipeline or the big business questions, how we answer it, it will get more flexible and more agile. There will still be of course, oversight, but I think the richness of who can handle this is quite a new vision for market research, especially for consumer insights. And as individuals, I think we will spend less time on handling smaller ad hoc questions, and we will free up time to focus on more large-scale, diverse projects, because that long tail could easily be handled with a new, quite powerful and eager to learn assistant who has the potential in the coming years to do even bigger and greater things.
Hopefully that was a good sneak peek at what we've been working on. If this is interesting to you, if you found some of these ideas exciting, we have an alpha program, which is people that want to get involved, do some early stage testing, iron out some of the kinks, and help to shape what we think is quite an exciting proposition. If you have a specific business question that we can work with you on that could be addressed in the UK, US in this sort of form with around a sample of 300, so some sort of ad hoc business problem, get in touch. My email is there. I think there'll be an email or a call to action, a landing page afterwards. Get in touch. Give us the problem. We'll probably do a short call in the first pass. We will run that analysis at no cost to you. All we ask is that we can spend a bit of time on a call to do a bit of debrief about what you found interesting, useful, and where we missed the mark. We're particularly interested in how this might be useful in marketing, how it might be useful in sales. So if you have anything that fits that bill, we'd be very happy to speak to you. I think now we have a couple of minutes, and we can go over for a little bit as well to take a few questions.
Sean, there's an interesting question around handling language, whether it's slang, poorly written language, or non-English languages. Where is the technology today, and where it can go in the future?
Yeah, I think on our roadmap, we anticipate having all of the markets that Streetbees currently serves, which is pretty much everywhere, by probably the end of the summer. So there is some nuance in how you make this work for non-English language. There's a bit more complexity in how the data gets classified and things like that. But yeah, supporting non-English is very much on the roadmap.
Amazing. And I see a question around, will there be a future jobs for insights teams? And I think hopefully I didn't sound like we will all be gone. I think it's just going to be a change. And if anything, a happier place. Sometimes it can be quite day-to-day crunching small details that require a lot of attention, and the attention even can lead into mistakes. But I think we will transition into more strategic thinking, freeing up time for bigger, more impactful projects, and reconsidering how we allocate. And we mentioned that there will still be an element of human know-how. The commercial priorities of a company, it's still currently not on the bot. There is that initial shaping, but I think it's a very powerful assistant to have. I call it a very eager to learn and eager to do junior in your team. It was promising to work hard. So I think Insights team will still have a job. It may look slightly different than how it was yesterday, but hopefully it will be more exciting in the future.
Yeah, I think a big maybe part of the proposition here, because I see there's a few questions about will Insight people still have a job. I think a lot of this is the Insights by definition have to focus on the big strategic priorities and the big projects and the big segmentations and these things. What that often means that if you're in a small market and you're in a small subcategory and you're looking after a small brand, in a large organization, sometimes it might be hard just for you to get onto the Insights roadmap, right?
Yeah. And
what happens then is they make best efforts, intelligent guesses, things like that. I think where this technology is interesting is now there's something there that actually we can bring consumer insights to those problems.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, I think we're right on the dot. Thank you, everyone. We mentioned it in the chat, but this is all recorded and you will have access to it. And if you have any questions to myself or to Sean, or if you're interested in our Alpha program, please get in touch and we'll be happy to continue the conversation. Thank you all.